Hello everybody, this is Dr. Reyes-Fournier coming to you, doing a recap for week 2, where we're going to be discussing active and passive listening and Carl Rogers and his person-centered therapy. Let us start with Carl Rogers because he is really the star of the show this week. Carl Rogers, not only did he come up with a form of counseling and psychotherapy, he came up with a philosophy. And this philosophy is one of the reasons why he's one of the first therapists and theories that you are encountering in this class. Prior to Dr. Rogers, we had, people like Sigmund Freud and Adler and Otto Rank and Carl Jung, who didn't practice the way that Rogers practiced. And also during the time of Rogers coming up, he was also competing with, the behaviorists who were coming up with their own theories. I mean, basically back in the 60s, you would see at these psychological conferences, not that I was there, mind you, I'm just saying that from history you could find that, he's presenting at the same conferences as B.F. Skinner. So these drastic differences in types of therapy were coming up during the same time. Carl Rogers' theory, first of all, as a man, he was going to study religion. And for some reason decided to go into psychology. However, that caring for man was still in his work, and you could see that still. He started working and learning the theories of Otto Rank, who, you're going to find in the next few years, we're going to be seeing a lot more of, only in that, not that he's around, mind you, but his theories that came out right after Freud, and he worked with Freud, were different from Freud's, and unfortunately, because he was one of Freud's friends, we relegated a lot of the psychoanalytic people to this back shelf, saying, well, their theory was kind of weird and it didn't really explain things. However, Otto Rank, was the first to really look at attachment, and he was one of the first to look at the mother-child bond, birth trauma, things like that. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of him. But bottom line, Freud saw people as sick, whereas Rogers saw that man in general is good, and that we strive to be good, and that any kind of mental illness and things like that are caused by distortions and basically straying from that normalness. He believed that we were all driven to better ourselves. He believed that we had the motivation, an intrinsic motivation, to be the best that we can be, and that need to actualize that you see from most humanists like Maslow is apparent in everything that he does, because the core belief of the client is that they have their answers. They know their answers. They should be directing their own therapy, and we are there to facilitate them. That we are there to support them, and if need be, occasionally show them certain ways of doing certain things, but not, imposing our own ideas. Whereas you'll look at behaviorism later on, and we are definitely saying, no, that's a messed up idea. You need to change it to something like this. Carl Rogers did not do that kind of work. He believed that we, as human beings, needed positive regard. Positive self-regard, which is self-esteem. Positive regard, meaning love and affection from another human being. And not just babies need that we need that our whole lives. And that we get used to this half-assed kind of conditional love from people. That if we do something good, then we get loved. If we don't, then we don't get loved. So we work at the good even to our own dysfunction just to get that love. And that's one of the places where we're going to get those distortions that he talks about. He talked about working to become your real self. Real self is that person that you want to grow up to be and that you want to become. And when we're not that real self, that we have incongruity. And that is basically how he would define neurosis, that we're not quite being ourselves. And that other person that we're being is why we don't feel good about ourselves. His humanistic theory talked about the fully functioning person. Please read more about this. I will be giving you this link so you can read more about that. So, big time, he was about congruency, empathy, and respect. One of the things that sets Carl Rogers apart in his theory, apart from every other theory you're going to see, is he talked a lot about who we needed to be in therapy and who we needed to be as therapists in the room with the client. We talked about active listening this week, and active listening, like most of you said, is where we are providing feedback, we're listening, we're trying to comprehend, we're clarifying. A lot of the techniques that you learn from Rogers is the reflective listening, mirroring. He also talked about how our bodies should be while we're sitting in front of the client. So we got the head nods, we got the smiles, and all that stuff. So where did we mess up this week in terms of the passive listening? And this is, I understand what happens. It's like if you're doing any kind of research on the internet, you look up active listening and you're going to find 3 million hits on active listening, and everybody has a very similar idea. Here you are in good therapy, and they're talking about active listening. Go to 4Grainer, which is a passion for jewelry and success. I don't know who this is. And active listening is that effective listening, and passive listening is like you're a recorder and you're just absorbing information. And that's it. And that's not quite what we do, is it? However, that's where, if you were not completely wrong and talking about ignoring, this is pretty much where a lot of you got stuck in that, okay, passive listening is that we're just hearing things, but we're not really interacting. If we go straight to the psychology dictionary, okay, it says, what is passive listening? And it starts, the sentence is very specific. With regard to psychotherapy and counseling, it's an attentive listening by a counselor or therapy professional without impeding or disrupting the client in any manner. Okay? But what does that mean? Why would we need to do that? A lot of what Rogers did, and even with Gloria, you could see between the moments of, I'm going to put it right there. Between the moments of actively listening and clarifying with Gloria, he sat there, almost impassively, where he's not showing a lot of reaction. This is a client who's coming in there to share us. This is a divorcee coming in to share about her guilt, about how she feels weird that, she's sleeping with men and she's a divorced woman, especially during that time, and she has kids, and what kind of person does that make her? And some of you pointed this out, and I think it's an important thing to point out. In that time, here she is with an old guy, and she's talking about this. And he didn't indicate in his face or anything else shock, dismay, judgment of any kind. He's just listening to her. Why would he just be listening to her? Because when a client is talking many times, they're going to share things that are uncomfortable for them. If they see you react in your face, sometimes, okay, just sometimes, they're going to feel judged. And one of the things that we are not supposed to be doing is that as counselors, and once again, Rogers was very clear about who we need to be in that room with them. And he worked so much on who he was as a counselor and a therapist. And when he speaks I want you to really listen to how he talks about that, because it's so important what he's saying. When he talks about what kind of counseling he does, he talks about himself in the session. He talks about who he was in that session. And the idea, these are the things that I want you to look at. It does not help in the long run to act as though I am something I am not. Okay? 1, I have found it effective in my dealings with people to be accepting of myself. This is his own work that he did in his own person. I have found it to be enormous value when I can permit myself to understand another person. In understanding another human being, you need to accept it. You need to accept them unconditionally. And this is where the unconditional stuff comes in. If being a passive listener is not looking at things and listening to people as if they're not saying anything to you, it's that you're fully accepting them. And I don't have to react with my face, this, oh my God, that really sucks. However, there are times when someone's telling you something very sad or whatever that you can emote with them. I just, you need to be, especially in the beginning, you need to be very careful with that. And then a couple more of these that are very important as well that I want you to read as you get the chance to once I post these. So this week was kind of a weird week, and I know that the active and passive listening thing, this isn't the first time I've taught the course, and I know it gets people every single time. Don't worry about it. What I need you to do in the future, when you look things up and when you do your research, be very specific what you're looking up. Be very specific as to, where the terminology is being defined. You are no longer in the regular world. You're in the world of counseling. And sometimes we take words and we use them differently. And then people take our words. For example, I'm going to go back to this person. This person took the words active and passive listening and liked what they liked, and then they disregarded the other stuff. Passive listening is a very important thing. Okay? There's a difference between listening and hearing, and we're talking about listening. And all listening involves being engaged. So, that's it for this week. If you have any questions, please email me. And next week we have our first paper due. I will be posting more things on where to get case studies and things like that. And that should do it. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.